Hello, EcoFarm. What's up? Welcome to EcoFarm 2026. We made it. Thanks for taking your seats. We're going to get going. It's just after 8 o'clock. I know it's late. I've been hearing about it all day. Why are you guys having a plenary at 8 o'clock at night? I know. We're gonna talk about it and see if there's another time that we can have it. But for now, this is it, and it's not going to disappoint you. You will be awake. You will be awake. You will be riveted. Your mind will be blown this evening, I promise you. And the good news is you can have some tea after this with chocolate in the back, looking at Adelia's art and talking with Carlton Turner and some of the board and some of us on staff. And the tea is from Mountain Rose Herbs, and it's all organic, and the chocolate is organic, and everything in that kitchen is organic because we bring everything in here from local growers. It is happening. It is happening. So when we think about what the possibility of organic could look like, it could look like this. It could look like conversations and connections with people that you've never met, maybe that don't look like you, maybe that don't even come from where you come from, and it could be a very fruitful, growthful moment, right? My name is Rebecca North. I'm Executive Director at the Ecological Farming Association. I'm so excited to have you all here, and I'm so grateful for our staff who are just such a dream team, and the planning committee and the board are sponsors. So many people to thank, and you all are some of them. And it's so exciting for me to welcome Carlton Turner and Leonard Diggs and Michael Ackley Grady to the stage tonight, and Kari and Migdil. We have so many amazing things for you tonight. Thank you very much for coming.
Hello and welcome. I am Michael Ackley Grady, proud board member. Thank you. Farm up in El Dorado, California, where we raise sheep and goats. So just wanted to do a quick intro of myself, and I'm here to give you guys the housekeeping announcements for tonight. Please note that there are headsets for Spanish speakers to listen in. You can find them on the table by the door. Please wear your conference name badge at all times. We will also be checking IDs at all events serving alcohol. Immediately following tonight's keynote session, there will be a warm herbal tea donated by Mountain Rose Herbs and art display by Adelia Mendez. Enjoy, say hello to new and old friends, and get some rest for a fun few days ahead. Join us for 7 Pointed Star Awakening on the beach on Thursday, January 22nd from 8 to 9 a.m. Also, yoga is from 8 to 9 each morning. Come visit the Healing Center in the Marlin and add your name to the list. Help us make EcoFarm a zero-waste event. Please use the recycling and compost bins placed around the conference grounds. All containers, plates, coffee cups, and utensils offered in the kitchen and by our vendors are compostable. Get your organic, cotton, conference, and Dirt First t-shirts, hats available in the surf and sand. We will also have silent auction items this year. Water stations are available around campus thanks to U.S. Pure Water. For meal times, please refer to the schedule in your program booklet and not the hours printed on your Asilomar meal tickets. If you are not registered for lodging on the Asilomar conference grounds, please use street parking. Watch out for those no parking signs to make sure you don't get a parking ticket. There are heavy fines for parking in the fire lanes. There is no sleeping in cars or vans on the Asilomar grounds, and all state park rules are enforced. Who here participated in the bus tour and pre-conference? Awesome. Hope you all had a great day. And don't forget to fill out your survey if you haven't. Please fill out your surveys after every workshop. QR codes and paper options are available. EcoFarm seeks to create a community and culture that is respectful, open, curious, and kind. Please join us in these agreements to create a good experience for all. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Herthel. I'm the Tribal Elder and Education and Outreach Director with the Esalen Tribe of Monterey County. I represent the original people of this land, stretching from the Big Sur coast up the Carmel River, across the Santa Lucia Mountains, and into the inland valleys where so much of today's agriculture takes place. This evening, we gather on the homelands of my ancestors, a place shaped by thousands of years of indigenous land stewardship, fire tending, seed saving, water care, and reciprocal relationship with soil, plants, and all beings. Before we begin this evening's conference, I want to invite us into a right relationship with the land beneath our feet, because resilience and regeneration are not new ideas. They are ancient practices carried on by the first people of this place. Seeds of Strength. EcoFarm theme this year, Seeds of Strength, empowering farmers for a changing climate, is something my ancestors understood in their bones. Seeds are not just food. Seeds are memories. Seeds are agreements between generations. Seeds are promises we make to the future. And in the time of intensifying climate disruption, the strength we need will come from returning these practices that center relationship over extraction, reciprocity over profit, and belonging over domination. This is indigenous science. This is indigenous ecological knowledge, and this knowledge is alive here today. Honoring the original stewards, the Esalen people tended these lands for millennia, lighting coal-burning cultural fires, shaping the oak, woodlands, and coastal sage, understanding water as a living relative, and maintaining biodiversity through ceremony, story, and practice. Climate resilience is not new work. It is an old responsibility, and yet indigenous people were violently disrupted from these lands. Today we continue the work of reclaiming our presence and restoring our relationships, and ensuring that the next generation has a more stable and just world. A call to shared responsibility. A land acknowledgement is not only about the past, it is a commitment to the future. So when I invite you as farmers, land steward, educators, scientists, and community members to ask, what will we plant? How will we plant seeds of repair? How will we honor the land not just as a resource but as a relative? And how will we make decisions that ensure the next 7 generations can thrive? My closing blessing. As we begin this conference, may the land remember your footsteps with gratitude. May the seeds you plant carry stories of resilience. May the water flow clear. May the soils remain alive. and may we move together toward a future guided by relationship, responsibility, and the wisdom of the land's first people. Thank you for honoring the Esalen homelands. May this gathering be a seed of strength for all of our communities. And now I will speak directly to the land as an elder would to a relative. Mak pirana, ius mak mi siushin, mak roteki shururu, mak pirana, ius mak mi siushin, mak roteki shururu, mak pirana, ius mak mi siushin, mak roteki shururu, mak pirana, ius mak mi siushin, mak roteki shururu.
It's a pleasure to be over here and meet with people. They have this responsibility to care the land, the water, the air, and the sun or the heat. But actually, I'm coming from South America. My name is Emilio Ballon. I'm part of the Quechua or the Inca people. I think we have relation, all the indigenous people, all over of this continent, north, central, south, including people in the Asia area. Our ancestors, they leave it to us, the great or the big responsibility to care what they say for the future generations. The people in these times, they forgot this type of responsibility, include, I will say, the indigenous people, because we follow the technology, and the technology actually is eating us. We didn't pay attention to our children, less we can be attention to the elements of the Mother Nature. One simple example, you don't pay for the light. The Father, Son give it to you and the heat. But you have to pay to the electrical or the gas company. Source they can come in from the Mother Nature. And we don't give any attention and giving back anything to the Mother Nature. In my language, we say Pachamama to the Mother Earth. And we say the earth is the body of the mother, and the water is his blood. And we have to be very careful, and we're using this type of the elements. Because tomorrow, when this Mother Nature, water Father, is going to leave us out of these elements, we are going to suffer a lot. Means, my people said, we have to be very careful in the ways we use it, because it's free for you. When you have problems of the breathing, you go to the hospital, you have to pay thousands of the dollars for the oxygen. But this guy, the boss, give it to you free. And we don't care this type of the things. When we're doing any type of the activity, we have to ask him permission to the spirits. They own this land. Sometimes we're thinking we own the house, we own the car, we don't own anything. This guy give it to you for some period of the time. Could be one day, it could be 1 month, or could be many years. Dalai Lama, it was mentioned, we have to be thankful all the time for the little thing you have or you enjoy. But it's very important to enjoy when you have your family together, when you have together your community, when you care about people. We're coming over here to making service, not to get the service from the Mother Nature, but actually I saw how in my country people, they have to fighting for take care of the land, take care of the water. The same thing happened in this country, and we are still suffering for this type of the things. Our major responsibility in the way we have to be is to take care these simple things we have in our hands free. I ask him to every single one there in this moment to say thank you to these spirits of this land. They give it to us the permission to making this wonderful event. Thank you to the people. They organize also. It's a lot of sacrifice to doing this type of things. Thank you to them. Thanks to the people. They making the food for us. Thanks to the people also. They clean the area for us. Sometimes we don't say thank you to these people because we're thinking we own all these type of the things. And these people, they have the obligation to do all these type of the things. Thank you to these people. We have these comfortable times to eating, drinking, and thank you to the people also. They sacrifice and making things for giving to us good service. My grandfather was telling me before he passed away, put a bunch of the seeds in my hand, and he said, son, this is life. I believe the seeds actually is life. It's not the way you can thinking money is going to be the life. You cannot eat the money. I'm sorry. You go to the bank and pull the money from the bank, but you cannot plant in this money. The seeds you can plant in, and you can eat free, or you can eat raw, or you can, anyway, or you can cook. But not only that, we have actually this type of the situation right now, this big corporation beginning to take. The last source, we have the indigenous people in our hands. We have all these big companies, these corporations, they're beginning to give it to us, the GMOs or the genetic engineering seeds. Actually, who controlling seeds, controlling life. We have to be very careful, and thanks to the people, they are involved in this hard activity because it's not easy to be a farmer. It's very hard. Also, it will be very important to begin into saving, and don't throw your food in the garbage, because we don't know how much time the people they making these things, they come in and feeding you. My people, they give it to me the mission to say these few words to you. And thank you much again to the people there over here to making presence and supporting this type of event. In my language, we don't have, for example, thank you, or we don't have this word we can say, or greeting, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, etc. In my language, we have the greetings is Amasua, Amaluya, Amakela. Means don't be lazy, don't lie, and don't steal. And the answer is Campis Kikilantah, be the same. I will finish my little talk with you, my conversation with you, and thank again to the people that organized this event. I will say, usually we eating, we drinking, and we forgot these spirits. And we have to feed them the same time to them. Actually, in my tradition, when we're eating, we give in to them. When we're drinking, we give in to them. Why? Because we have to be in connection with the spirits. They take care of us when we are in the way we have to touch with them. Anti suyo, punti suyo, cincha suyo, koya suyo, apa huyu, pushpa kanchi, ampi kaya mamita, kachi, ulide, awaya kanchi, into mala kanchi to be, pachamama, kuiti, suyo. Anto halista mamita, pachamama, kachi kanta kusano manuslima ng manslala. Suwasta kanchi manita, wala to kuiti, ampi kaya iti, apa kaya, mamita, pachamama. We have to kiss this lady because she's supporting us, all the people in this planet, and we don't care to her. We're still digging, we're still extracting things, and we don't say thank you. In my tradition, this is the way we have to be in touch and relation with the spirits. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Amigdio and Kari for grounding us in this space. Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Chang with EcoFarm. So good to see you all gathered today. I have the pleasure of announcing our keynote speaker, Carlton Turner, for tonight, who will be joined in discussion by Leonard Diggs later on. Many of y'all were here today for pre-conferences or maybe for the bus tour. Maybe you were in a room of song and art today, sharing lessons and stories about permaculture and our collective future, or maybe you are in deep discussion about building equitable partnerships in the supply chain, or maybe you have been part of the work and deliberation of preserving the integrity of seeds that belong to the commons. But in each of these rooms, there are many seeds planted, and if you were on the bus tour, you got to see the fruition of seeds planted many years ago that continue to grow and fractal outwards. Tonight, Mr. Carlton will speak to seeds and the sacred abundance found in small places. Carlton Turner is an artist, agriculturalist, builder, researcher, and co-founder / co-director of the Mississippi Center for Cultural Production. He brings more than 20 years of organizational development and management experience in the arts and culture sector. In the conversation afterwards, Mr. Diggs will be joining on stage. Leonard Diggs is the Director of Operations and Farming Education at Pie Ranch in Central California, and he has managed sustainable and organic farms for more than 30 years. I invite everyone to preview the upcoming program. We have a lot coming. There's a few especially relevant offerings that relate to today's keynote. So looking forward, there is a workshop called Community versus Commodity that was organized by Leonard, and he will be speaking on that one. And there will also be a Mississippi delegation coming to speak on Friday and sharing their journey from conventional to organic. And there is also a workshop on land access tomorrow called Land Reform, Confronting Consolidation and Building Community Control. So we have lots of good stuff coming up, and we hope that they are enriching and connective for you. Now please join me in a round of applause as Carlton joins us on stage.
How y'all doing? All right. Wake it up in here now. All right. I'll start with a disclaimer. There's a lot of pressure these days in public speaking. A dual-bladed sword, if you will. One side razor sharp. It slices with the expectation that the speaker is going to say something profound to meet the moment that we're experiencing in this country and in the world. The other side of the blade is jagged and rusted. The result of playing too much whack-a-mole on Instagram and TikTok. This side has been dulled by the sound bites and gotcha moments captured by smartphones before being entered in the global race for the attention of scrolling eyes. That side doesn't cut as much as it infects and festers and never really goes away. It makes speaking in public a risky proposition, because these words become testaments unto themselves and used for fodder in courts, both sanctioned and the ones of public opinion. So don't expect a fiery speech to get you all motivated towards mass mobilization. I don't have an iconic protest anthem or any words of advice or instruction for what you should be doing differently with your life. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about farming. What I look like standing up here in a room of professional growers telling you about your craft. No, I'm just a storyteller from Mississippi that's in love with witnessing life and growth and contributing to the building of the world our future deserves. Now that we got that out the way, so what would happen if we planted every seed? How would the world be different if the sidewalks were lined with fruits and vegetables instead of concrete and asphalt? How would a classroom that didn't know hunger operate differently? How would our brains function if we were all well-nourished? How would our world look if we designed it from the viewpoint of those that plant seeds, nurture growth, and take pride in being a champion for the land? This talk is an homage to seeds and land, to the multitude of life that exists inside the tiniest of spaces, the hidden bounty that is held in waiting for the perfect conditions to be cradled in the warmth of the sun-baked soil, to be watered and showed patience, and given space to grow and show us all that it holds inside. Sun, water, and air. I come to you today representing the great people of the beautiful lands of Mississippi. Any folks from Mississippi out there? It's supposed to be like 2. I guess they just hadn't made it yet. Mississippi is an Ojibwe word. It means great river. It's the indigenous land of the Choctaw and Chickasaw, the Natchez, Biloxi, and Pascagoula people. There were many more tribes of people, their names erased by reductionist and revisionist history, but it's important to acknowledge them still and understand that any work we are to do in the name of healing, justice, and respect for this planet must start here. Not just with an acknowledgement, but with active remembrance. Our collective work begins with engaging the sovereign indigenous peoples of the Americas in dialogue and embracing their leadership. It's not enough to just say their names. We must also make sure that we work diligently to advance their sovereignty as part of freeing the land. So this is dedicated to Samuel and Epsie Roberts and Emmett and Genevia Turner, the 4 foundational pillars of my upbringing in Mississippi. My roots are planted in a rich and fertile soil, enriched with the sweat and blood of growers and builders, artisans and storytellers, preachers, teachers, cooks, and midwives. I live in Utica, Mississippi. This town sits at the foot of the Mississippi Delta, about 30 minutes from the Mississippi River. And growing up, I had 2 homes. My parents' 3-bedroom, 2-bath, built in the late 40s, sitting on 26 acres of good land on a major highway in rural Mississippi. It's here that I live with my brothers, 4 sisters, 1 brother, 8 of us in total. Some years that number would balloon as high as 14, as our home welcomed cousins and as brothers and sisters, aging elders, and play uncles at the end of their lives. Surrounding that home were the fields of Jubilee watermelons, yellow corn, pink-eyed purple hull peas, peanuts and sweet potatoes for roasting and pies, and all the things we love to eat. My other home belonged to my grandparents on my mother's side, Samuel and Epsie Roberts. Their house was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath wood home that housed 4 generations of relations: babies, grandparents, great-grandparents, Ma Dear, and Big Daddy. 13 warm bodies in all, living under one roof. The land around this modest home fed them all with flocks of chickens, gangs of turkeys, milk cows, and passels of pigs. Both of my homes were different, yet connected through blood and purpose. Either home by itself would live, but together, my siblings and I thrived. Grandma worked her entire life but never held a job. Her purpose was filled as a caregiver, tending to elder parents, both hers and her husband's, tending to her husband and her 10 children and gaggle of grandchildren. But like most mothers of yesterday and today, Grandma often forgot to care for herself. My mother, being her oldest girl, meant that there was a special mother-daughter relationship that I had the beneficiary of. Both my mama and my grandmother loved to talk. So when they would get together, I would often find myself becoming invisible, present but unnoticed. These were the moments when I could learn the nuances of our community. These ladies didn't speak like the men. The level of detail embedded in their casual conversation would decorate out to the edges of the community and allowed me to understand local color. My siblings and I spent a great deal of our weeks at Grandma's house, where she cooked a minimum of 2 full meals a day, mostly breakfast and supper. She had a depth of experience because she became the head cook in her parents' household at the age of 13. So when I met her in 1975, and she was at the tender age of 52, she had already clocked 10,000 hours of kitchen duty several times over. Her culinary talents checked in at expert level. Her artistry with spices and processes produced flavors that painted soundscapes on my young taste buds until she was no longer able to wield a spoon. That was in the late 90s. By then, my understanding of what constituted good food was definitive. A huge subset of my core memories start with coming into my grandmother's house and being met with a whiff of whatever savory, rustic alchemy she was concocting in her kitchen. This brew, this cornucopia of freshness, arranged daily in aromatic complexities, deep flavor profiles intended to elicit intense olfactory responses and induce saliva glands to erupt and gastrointestinal juices to flow. Grandma made magic with flour and lard. Each biscuit stamped with her 3-finger brand. In her kitchen, she took raw ingredients grown from her own backyard and became the maker of Black Boy Joy. If you've ever had a warm homemade jelly cake, then you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Root vegetables, greens and herbs, eggs, butter and cream, and all matter of woodsy wild things simmering on Granny's stove. You never knew what was cooking. No, literally, you never knew what she was cooking. Most times it was chicken with or without dumplings, beef stew, country ham steaks. Sometimes it was fresh game, deer, squirrels, rabbit. Other times more exotic items like chitlins or coon, possum, turtle. There was never a menu posted or an ingredient list. So I would always ask, Grandma, what's for dinner? Now, F.C.B. Roberts was not light on wit. She was always quick to reply with the high roll of the eyes behind glasses tilted slightly downward. Either you eatin' or you ain't. She was funny, but she meant that. She was beautiful and feisty. Grandma was a seasoned practitioner of healing magic in the kitchen. That was the place she called home. My mother's father's name was Samuel Roberts Sr. My granddaddy was born in South Mississippi in 1910. He was made long and strong like an oak. He was the color of a clear jar full of molasses backlit by a rising morning sun. The palms of his hands were the size of grizzly bear paws, and he could bend a railroad stake with those bare hands. He was more handsome than David and was the object of every woman's attention. He could carry 4 children on his shoulders, in his arms for miles and never lose stride. He raised, slaughtered, cured, and smoked his own meats. He could talk to animals. He fed the entire community with food that he grew all by himself. Growing up, he was the richest man that I knew. He was also functionally illiterate and had at least 2 families of children with similar names. I grew up with my grandfather as a central figure in my life. On cool fall nights after the sweet potato harvest, he would sit in his favorite armchair by the edge of a shallow double-edged fire in the front room of the house and push a medium-sized yam into the cooling embers and ashes and just let it sit. After a while, he'd push back the covering and dust off his sweet yam, peel it from the tip, and take a smiling bite into the rich sweetness. This man taught me how to eat good. It was from his tutelage that I learned how to survive. When he passed away in 1987, the quality of food our family and our community consumed changed drastically. I often call my grandfather a seed talker. He was generally a quiet man, or at least that's how I remember him. It might be that next to my grandmother, who I affectionately call the pre-internet, anyone might seem quiet. It may also be that what I remember of a man that I met in his late 60s, he had already become a more refined version of himself. At any rate, according to the stories I've been privy to since his passing, he wasn't a big talker. He was a doer. And what he did was take rudimentary tools, a crank tractor, a hoe, a stick, a shovel, a rake, a bucket, and turn soil and seed into beautiful seasonal bounties. He didn't waste words. In fact, he didn't do waste at all. He had a discerning eye and was able to find the value hidden in the most unfathomable of places. The animals he raised would benefit from the discarded parts of the produce that he grew, peanut vines and corn stalks, watermelon rinds. They all found a second life as fresh food for the animals. No need to buy feed. What didn't get discarded was cooked by grandma in the house. The scraps, what little was left after feeding 4 generations, was dumped in the slop jar to be fed to the hogs. It was a closed ecosystem that all contributed to and all benefited from. Nothing was disposable, nothing discarded, nothing thrown away. If something broke, it could be fixed. If it couldn't be fixed, then it could be repurposed into something altogether new and different. Around this time of year, Granddaddy would transition from farmer to woodsman. We would often work with him and harvest trees to make them into firewood to supply his home and the homes of elders that were no longer able to care for themselves. He would often take us through the woods to find some lonely tree and some hard but not impossible place to find and throw it. Throwing a tree just means chopping it down, but with strategy and precision to make sure it lands where you want it to land. We always wondered why he would walk past so many trees just to get to one particular tree so far from the truck. After my granddaddy passed and I got older, I realized that he was thinning the forest, taking trees that were distressed, diseased, and dying. He knew what to look for, knew what to take and what to leave. Today, my grandfather, a man with less than a 6th grade education, but with a lifetime of practical application honing life skills, would be called both a conservationist and an organic farmer. 2 words he probably never even heard. His skills and way of life have come back around to be in vogue. I call him a seed talker, but mostly because he spoke my growth. But his way of life isn't new. It's informed by indigenous practices that focused on being in right relationship with the land. His way of life was an extension of people that didn't have words for trash or worthless, not because they didn't have sophisticated systems of linguistics, but because their practices, the way they lived, had no use for the concept of waste. It wasn't part of their cultural understanding, wasn't part of their worldview. In the practice of living and being fully human, there really is no place for excess or waste. My grandfather was an extension of an ancient wisdom that existed on this land from the Atlantic to the Pacific before the practice of just being human was interrupted by those that came onto the shores and refused to see the beauty of the civilizations they encountered, refused to see the humans being. They only saw the potential for the accumulation of resources by any means. Subjugation, genocide, and colonization of the peoples, and domination and exploitation of the land, and all that it holds to build their own personal wealth and power. This, too, is cultural practice. It's a culture that focuses on the value that can be extracted because separation is the most important tool in their arsenal. Separate the resources from the land. Separate the savage from the civilized. Separate the native people from their language and culture, outlaw their rituals and spiritual practices. These things were done to eradicate the parts of life they encounter that don't yield to their own culture of domination. These are the values that we see reemerging in this current American public persona. It has never left us. Being raised in Mississippi, I can tell you it has always been there. Coming from a big family, collards, cornbread, fried chicken, and candied yams become the centerpiece of a visceral and ethereal experience, adorned by stories that bring layered emotions, tears, and some of the most gut-wrenching belly laughs that you'll ever experience. In this place, arts and culture bloom. At the same time, they fade into the performance ritual of everyday life. It's not just table talk. It's theatrical and emotional. It's personal. It's comedy and drama, and sometimes tragic. Food is the common denominator of humanity. It's the thing that everybody does. It permeates every aspect of our lives. The relationship that we have with our food is a recurring and enduring human narrative. The work I've done most of my adult life is to acknowledge those stories and the legacy and future of our community that is encoded within them. See, there's a generosity that comes naturally when you find that space in which you can be in conversation with the place, a harmony with the land. That energy can feel peculiar if measured against today's design of instant everything. There's a language in the songs of the morning birds, in the constant carving of the river and its many pathways, and the subtle but evident dance of the flower as it traces the sun across the sky. It's hard to hear through all the noise we generate by our need to go instead of just be. And it's almost impossible to decipher if you aren't listening. Taking responsibility for stewarding the growth of a seed is a delicate and important undertaking, and tending to a patch of earth is an humbling experience. Mostly because the land is always in charge. It has seniority. The land is on an epic multi-millennial journey through time and space, traveling at 67,000 miles per hour around our sun. We should be in awe just at that concept alone. The earth traveling at an inconceivable speed and still finds time to observe each season. For most of us, today could be Monday or March or midnight as we push to achieve a success that's been defined by both degrees and decimals. But the land doesn't care. To the land, we're just a blink in the eye because where most of us are standing used to be the ocean floor or a mountaintop, and will someday be that again and maybe even more. The land is trying to teach us, but we only seek to dominate it. See, that's the culture we inherited. But all the land wants is for us to listen. And listening is the lost art and possibly the most important key to our survival. As I mentioned earlier, I live and grew up in the small town of Utica, Mississippi. My family's been in this community for 8 generations. Utica was once a thriving town with 3 cotton gins, 2 sawmills, 2 high schools, a shirt factory, and a junior college. Main Street, Utica was the first paved road in the state of Mississippi. In its day, Utica was popping. My family has lived in this community for 8 generations, and with the closing of the Utica High School in 1993, Main Street traffic took a tremendous hit. The endless parade of buses, students, parents, faculty, and staff that called downtown Utica home was reduced to a trickle. Businesses suffered, but they were still alive. When the shirt factory closed in 1998, 100 women lost their jobs. The shirt factory was right across the street from the grocery store. Who in the home makes the decisions about meals and grocery lists? The women. That's right. And there were nearly 100 women right across the street from the grocery store. You know what you call 100 women working in close proximity in a small town in the 1980s? An economic engine. One that not only powered the Sunflower grocery store, but also Jerry's Appliances, Hood's grocery store, Strong's clothing store, the pharmacy, and half a dozen mom and pop stores up and down Main Street. So by the time the second high school closed in 2014, the grocery store was not far behind. And that's what makes the transformation of the town of Utica from one of food sovereignty to food insecurity such a tragic tale. Our community went from producing the vast majority of the food it consumed to losing the last grocery store in our community in 2014 to having to travel a minimum of 30 miles round trip to get to a below average store. As creatives, our first inclination in developing a response was the development of the Mississippi Center for Cultural Production, also known as SIP Culture, a place where the community could bring their dreams. But the pathway of dreaming was blocked by the unprocessed trauma of losing the grocery store. Listen, since the grocery store closed in 2014, not one citizen of Utica has died from starvation. So why was the grocery store so important? It was important because it became the last integrated, unaffiliated, non-religious, impromptu public space to receive and convey information in the community. And without it, our community was thrust into isolation, and the spectrum of information and interaction they had known and felt as part of their experience of home in Utica was severely narrowed. Narrow information equals narrow conversations, equals narrow analysis, equals narrow decisions, equals limited community power. So before we can begin to access the dreamscape as our jump-off point for reimagining our community, we have to work through the trauma and grief of the new reality of a diminished social fabric and how that impacts our ability to be a strong community. Social fabric is what keeps communities strong and resilient, especially rural ones. So in 2017, we began asking the community what it needs. The overwhelming response was a grocery store. We're asking the same question in 2020 and the same answer, grocery store. My experience growing up in rural Hinds County was filled with the highest quality natural foods you could imagine, none of which came out of a grocery store, cartons or plastic containers. But in 30 years' time, this community that provided more than 75% of its own food had become dependent on a grocery store. But in a town built on agricultural production, with a history of robust local food production, why was the conversation only about grocery stores and not about the groceries? There are some very important economic reasons why a full-service grocery store no longer makes sense for our community. But something happened in the late part of the 20th century that saw consumption usurp production as the dominant identity for rural communities. As a result, Utica, like many rural communities, was stuck trying to attract the grocery store as the primary solution to both food insecurity and economic development challenges. So about the groceries, we needed to talk about the groceries and all the ways our community procures and produces food. In 2019, I partnered with two researchers from Imagining America at UC Davis, Dr. Erica Cole-Arenas and Mina Matlin. Together, we launched Equitable Food Futures, a community research project designed to understand the role of storytelling on a community's ability to make decisions about their food systems. This participatory action research project was anchored by a community advisory group that trained and participated as community researchers. The project consisted of a randomized community survey, a series of focus groups, oral histories, and a community drive-through dinner. It launched in the fall of 2019, and then COVID. But that's another talk altogether. But what the pandemic did make clear to our community is the need for a larger conversation about food. In response, in 2021, we started the Sip Culture Community Farm and the Small Farm Apprentice Program. Both programs were designed to recenter agricultural production as a key element of our community identity. Through our research, we found that 44% of our community produces agricultural products for consumption. 49% have access to land that could be used for agricultural production. 76% have experience and skills in growing food. 51% have skills in storing and preserving food. 97% of our residents own their home. And 78% of our respondents have a previous generation of their family that lived in Utica. See, storytelling and remembering is not to be confused with nostalgia. Stories are important nodes of information technology that provide us with geospatial, economic, relational, and contextual data. And sound data is important for our communities to make sound and informed decisions about their future. And it allows us to begin reimagining our rural communities for the 21st century. Utica, like so many other rural communities, is dealing with infrastructural obsolescence. The buildings and designs of the streets, public utilities, and amenities no longer fit the changing needs of the people or the economy. Our community was designed in the late 19th century to support the plantation commerce of cotton and lumber, merchants and railroads. It supported producers and service providers, but as the economy shifted from local to global, the design of our community began to become obsolete. The localized ecosystem design of the 19th and 20th century was thrown even further out of balance than just the traditional dynamics of racialized capitalism. And like all ecosystems, when one part of it is out of balance, the entire system begins to fall. So we know the community desires to have more access to food and has the skills and experience to produce and procure it. We know the community is committed to long-term outcomes because they are homeowners and part of multi-generational families rooted in Utica. We know the community desires more spaces to be together socially and civically. We just needed an opportunity to bring all those things together in a way that made sense. In 2023, a member of our community advisory groups suggested the community form a food cooperative. Hallelujah. This gave birth to the Utica Food Club. And over the past few years, this club has been working with the community to buy fresh produce wholesale from local folks and distributors and make it available to the community locally. They've also been working on bylaws and the creation of a formal co-op structure. Now we're talking about groceries, not just the store. On May 3rd, we opened the Main Street Cultural Center in downtown Utica, Mississippi. Thank you. A project 6 years in the making. The opening of this newly imagined and renovated space marks a new beginning for our small rural town. This space, which occupies the corner lot in downtown Utica at the intersection of White Oak Street and Main Street, the only three-way stop sign in Main Street, hasn't been a viable business for more than 2 decades. Through this project, this space now provides a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen and an intimate venue for the presentation of music, film, and multidisciplinary arts, and serves as SIP Culture's primary presenting venue for year-round arts programs and a community hub of food access and civic engagement, including our weekly farmers market. The Main Street Cultural Center addresses 3 critical needs of the Utica community and surrounding areas. We're creating, through thoughtful, strategic, and intentional community engagement, the intergenerational and multicultural space for community gathering, sharing, and learning. Developing a space where food and culture are ever present, a place where history is acknowledged and valued, and the community works together to affirm our individual and collective identities. We're creating a place where the community can engage as cultural producers, specifically focusing on food and story as our primary mediums. And we are creating a physical space for the community to gather and engage in critical discourse and decision-making about their future. Our ability to achieve health and wellness in our community is directly tied to our agency with the land. It is deeply connected to our ability to construct an analysis of the trajectory our community has taken to this current moment. It's grounded in our ability to tell our own stories about food and our individual and collective histories to this land. And we believe that through the telling of these stories, we can supplement parts of the social fabric that has been lost over the past couple of generations and begin to construct a new community, one that centers the voice of the people that live here in fostering a place that provides health and wellness for all. In this process, Utica becomes the center of a renewed community energy embodied in the sense that anywhere you have land, we can grow. The work began the moment we offered this idea as a seed to our community to nurture. At that moment when we asked permission to share our dreams with the community and have those dreams embraced, the community began to share and place their dreams on top of ours. Together, our ideas and aspirations became interlaced, and that process, well, that's the work. That's the seed of collective transformation that gives birth to freedom. It's difficult to see the incremental change, like the sprouting of a seed or like the flower dancing to the rhythm of the sun, but also moving at 67,000 miles per hour through space and time. To all the farmers in here, you know about seeds. Some of them are small, just a little larger than a grain of sand. But with attention, sun, water, air, patience, a handful of seeds can mean the difference between life and death for an entire community. So in closing, I leave you with these questions. Imagine how the world would be different if we planted every seed. Imagine what would happen in our communities if we unlearned the concept of waste and extraction. Imagine what it would be like if we created an environment that nurtured life and meditated on abundance. How would our bodies respond if we mimicked the seasons? What would happen if you took to the land and just listened? The land is trying to teach us. All it wants is for us to listen and be. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. Test, test. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So it was interesting meeting this afternoon for the first time and to realize that across this country we can share dreams. And the dreams that you were talking about today are some of the same dreams that I feel like I've dreamed. And so it's really wonderful to be able to sit here and have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah. So many things come up for me in what you said. Groceries was one of the first ones. Because I grew up in my house and my mom would always say, let's go to the grocery store. But I hadn't heard somebody say grocery store in a while, because now I talk about supermarkets. My sister talks about running down to, Walmart, Nobody says grocery stores anymore. And where our food comes from and what is the key to that moment and the key to society and to cultures. So I'm curious about these foodways that you grew up with. You don't make a big deal out of talking about it. You don't place yourself in the center of that and say, I know how to grow these things. I understand how to make these things. You just talk about it in passing. And I'd like you to talk about it a little bit more in detail in terms of the impact it really had on your life.
Yeah, my grandfather, as I shared with you, he taught me how to farm. I would follow him around. He was basically our babysitter. When our parents would go to work, and my grandmother wouldn't allow us to be in the house during the day, so we'd have to go with granddaddy. And that was basically, and so from, early as I can remember, until he passed away when I was 13. We would be with him, and so basically we were learning to do. We were his field. We were his hands. And we weren't skilled, we were just, we would play too much, we were kids, and he wasn't going for any of that. So it was always this kind of really turbulent relationship that we were navigating, because he was a very serious man. He was all about the business of this food and all of that. But we got a chance to witness firsthand going into the fields. He would teach us how to plant these very long rows of sweet potatoes, and he would say, all you got to do is do this. He would break it down to the simplest thing. Just put this potato slip right there, and put another one right there. And then he'd come behind us with a stick, and he would just poke. He would just hit the end of that root and put it in the ground. And it was like, we would do that all day. We would be the ones when it's time to harvest peanuts, we would be harvesting literally just tons of peanuts on this truck. And it was just me and my brother, who's 13 months older than I. And we would follow him around and just be wherever he would be. Meaning whatever he was doing, we were doing. And so except hunting, he wouldn't take us hunting. My father was from New York, and he wasn't really into that stuff. And the first time he took us hunting, he left me at this tree. He was like, just stand here, here's the shotgun, the deer's gonna come right here, just shoot it when it come out. And I stood there, it was cold, it was rainy, and this tree had fallen down. And so I was like, I'm not standing out here in the rain. So I got in the tree and laid down this way with the same as the tree so that the water didn't fall on me. And he came by about 45 minutes later. He said, "Boy, what happened? The deer came right there. Where was you at?" I was like, "I don't know, man. I was sleeping." He said, "That's the end of your hunting career." It was those things, growing, not just learning how to grow the food, but learning how to be in service of community. Because the first thing that he would do is he wasn't raising all that food to just go to market. He was raising the food first to feed family. It was a lot of mouths. My mother had 9 brothers and sisters, had a ton of cousins, and they also, my grandmother had the house that everybody came to. So food was ever present. But it was also making sure that everybody around the community ate. So he ended up giving away more food than he sold. And that idea of service first, that the food is in service of the needs of the people, it permeated the way that I think about all of my work.
Yeah, you hit a kind of something we talked about a little bit earlier, which is food to feed your family first, to share with the people next to you, to barter, which we've lost track of that word. I mean, we don't have opportunities to barter as much as we used to.
Yeah, well, we got to get the bag.
We do. And then the last on that list was selling.
That's right.
That was the trickle down, was to sell. And so that was something that resonated with me right away. You also talk about your grandfather being very specific and intentioned, and you spoke to us about waste versus excess. And he didn't sound like a wasteful person.
No, not at all. Yeah, not at all. It was, everything had order and it had a place. And I don't remember my grandparents' home having a garbage can. There was no garbage pickup. That was not something that existed in our rural community. And there wasn't garbage around the house. The things that could be burned got burned. If it was paper or, something that could be burned was burned. But I remember, and this may make me sound really old, but I remember the 50-pound sacks of flour that my grandmother would go and get from the grocery store, from the co-op actually, and that it had a dish rag that was sewn into the seam. So when you bought the 50-pound bag, you also got a dish rag with it. And I just remember that because she used to also spank me with those dish rags. So the dish rags became very, very important in my memory. And when I was talking to my mother the other night, she's 83 years old, and she remembers back in the day, even before my day, they would take those flour sacks and they would use those to make linen and make tablecloths. And so everything had a purpose. It had multiple purposes and multiple functions, and it just was not a community practice to throw things away. And it was the same way that they treated people. They didn't throw people away. And I think that concept is also lost on us today. We throw a lot of relationships away. We're very petty people these days, and that didn't fit into the way that community needed to lean on each other to survive in that time.
Yeah, it's a hard time, though. It has been for a while. I mean, I've been saying to myself, we get on people who throw trash down, but we didn't evolve in a world where throwing trash down was an issue because there was decomposable things in your life. If you threw an orange peel down on the ground, it decomposed. But if you throw a wrapper down on the ground, that's a problem. And yet humans evolved with this relationship with the land and with the environment that was natural, and they didn't have to make those adjustments that we're having to make and that young people are having to make now because they haven't been exposed to what you were. And I see in your work this effort to expose young people and old to ways that they have not had opportunities to be exposed to before. What's the process? What's the step? What do you see when you try that?
Yeah, I think, you know, we have generations of people that have not lived that as a practice, have not grown food. You know, they can tell you, yeah, my grandmama had a garden, or, you know, I used to be out there with them, but they don't have a practice of, like, most of the food that they eat. I have folks on my farm that work on the farm that don't eat vegetables. Literally, like, don't eat vegetables. And it's just like, you know, you grow that, you nurture it, you love it, you harvest it, and you will sell it to others, but you won't ingest it because you don't eat that. And it's and you know, I remember that ideology as a child. Like, I remember as a child saying, I don't eat squash. And you're like, you know, now, like, I love squash. You know, like, it was the silliness of, like, not trying new things. And I think a lot of our community members, you know, it's a long, tedious process. It is a back and forth. It is the ability, we have to have the ability to listen to what people are saying they need before we try to tell them what they need. And I think that's been the process for us. So we started our work in community in 2017 with a series of conversations in community. And what we started those conversations doing is putting maps on the wall that had kind of like our tri-county area. And we would ask people who would come to these gatherings to go to the map and map 4 locations. We wanted you to map where you live, where you work, where you shop, and where you worship. And what you begin to see is that these maps, that at some point, probably 30, 40 years ago, all of those dots would have been, you could make a circle around all of those dots. Now those dots are like this, you know. And for the first time, our community had to reckon with the reality that we were no longer, we had become a bedroom community, where the only thing that people were doing in Utica was sleeping. And that was a real hard thing for the community to hear themselves say, because in their minds, they were just in a slump, right? They were, oh, you know, the grocery store closed, but we're gonna get a grocery store back, and, you know, and all the things that were gonna come back, and that the tides were gonna change. But even more than that, they were critiquing the community based on this idea that it was still the community that they grew up in. And when they realized that it was no longer that community, that critique was no longer appropriate. And so it changed the tenor of the conversations that we were able to have when we were able to come to the realization that we were no longer a central player in our own livelihoods. So I think for us, that mapping exercise exposed a lot of the opportunity for where we could intersect and have conversations and ask people about the past. And what I mean by the past is not from nostalgia. It was really using people's stories and their recollection of what the town used to do and what it used to have as a way to map the resources that existed, map the way that the community was structured. And then now, what can we learn from that? What can we duplicate? What is no longer relevant? And what are the things that we now need to invent because they don't exist at all? So that's been our process, working with young people that are interested in growing to learn sustainable agriculture. One thing that's really interesting is that in Mississippi, and especially in our small black communities, we have a ton of young people that are going to the university and getting agricultural degrees. But they're not coming back to produce food. They're going to work for the wildlife and fisheries. They're going to work for the chicken company. They're working for Bryan Foods. They're working for Sanderson Farms. They're working for all of these large industrial units that don't provide food for the community. Yeah. And so we have all of these people who have an interest, but there's no pathway to really focusing on the development of local food infrastructure. So that's where we've been really trying to place our energies.
Yeah. You know, when we were speaking at lunch, I mentioned that for me, it starts with home sovereignty. And we talk a lot about food sovereignty, But home sovereignty, for me, is where you make something at home. You grow something at home. Your neighbor makes something, and together you have block sovereignty, and pretty soon you have city sovereignty. And we begin to have resilience, because resilience isn't the grocery store. The grocery store is not the antidote to food deserts.
Right.
But when people think that everything they need is in the grocery store, that's a tough one. And so a lot of us have not grown up with making what we need and growing what we want. And that shift is a big shift. It's a social shift because, we see the hierarchy of needs differently, We see food as something we can pay for. Yeah. We don't see that at the top tier of that's something that we need all the time around us.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with this. It sounds like people in your community may be struggling with it, and I'm wondering how do we turn that around?
Yeah.
How do we get folks to believe that it's okay to do something, make something, maybe still hold your job, but get 30, 40% of what you need from your local community?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm going to say two things about it. One, the pandemic, unfortunately, we had to have a crisis for the community to do the things that they already knew how to do. One of the things we realized through the equitable food futures work, the research that we were doing, the survey, is that those skills still exist in abundance in our community. People know how to grow food, they know how to preserve food, they fish, they hunt, they do all the things that are necessary to be home sovereign. And through that same process, we heard our elders tell us that they were excited when they saw the jelly for the first time on the shelf in the grocery store, because it meant that they no longer had to make it. Mm-hmm. And that it meant that they could now focus their energy on doing something different than farming. And those two things are real. So you have both a generation that has not had the exposure to growing as a central identity of the community, and a generation that has done it, been there, and are done with it. And so how do we bridge that gap, and hopefully it doesn't require a crisis to put us back in a mode in which we recognize those things. The second thing I'll say is that this is one of the places where when people talk about how backwards Mississippi is, plays actually in our favor. And what that means for me, because I don't think that we're backwards at all, but I think that we're closer to the solution than we are the problem. Meaning that the infrastructure exists in our community to actually make a shift that would not be seismic. It would just be relational. Like, we could go to doing some things differently, make some minor adjustments, and we could actually make a dent in the needs of our community. Because we're not, as a state, bought into, super high industrial commodification. Mm-hmm. And so I think that those are the things that we're leaning into, is both relying on those that have the experience to tap them back into the game as mentors, as to help us understand process and what the possibilities are, and also getting these young people to be involved in their own destiny a little bit more solidly.
Yeah. You mentioned the land, and we've had land acknowledgements tonight. And the land doesn't care, is something you said. What does the land not care about? It doesn't care about being acknowledged, probably, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think the acknowledgement is for us to get ourselves right. It's not for the land. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. People talk about saving the earth. The earth doesn't need saving. The earth will be here long after we're gone. Yeah. If we want to stay around, we've got to come into right relationship. And that's just the reality of it. The land doesn't care about whatever we have going on because it has the ability, just like we have the ability, to repair itself. It has everything that it needs, it comes with it. It's a complete package. And we forget that we are that same way. Like everything we need, we have already. We have the ability, the knowledge, the access, the resources, everything is provided. But when you're in a hyper-capitalistic, consumer-based model, then everything is about getting more from a thing than what it actually can give. That's kind of what capitalism is about. It's like, I got this thing, I spent $1 on it, I want to make $1 million off of it.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to change these dynamics in ways that impact everything around you negatively. So for us, the main thing that we can do is to be in right relationship, because when we're in conversation with the land gives us all the secrets that we need to uncover all the possibilities that land can give. When we don't listen and we think we know everything, then we're going to have problems. And I think we, live in a culture that, in Mississippi, across, you can drive down any highway, any back road, and you just see all the clear cutting of land, just clear cutting of trees, like hardwood, old growth timber. It's just that's the thing, because it makes money, right? And not considering what it does to the actual land, what it does to the land that's around it. It's a lot of things that aren't considered from a community standpoint because they're about the upliftment of an individualized process. And those two things really don't work well together. But back to the land, it doesn't really care.
Say that all again right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You said to me earlier today about how your grandfather had all this meat in his smokehouse, thousands of dollars worth of meat.
Yeah.
And that was real wealth sitting there. But what people didn't see that necessarily.
People call us poor.
Yes, they called you poor.
Dude, have you ever been to my grandma's kitchen? Like, we eat like kings,
And you mentioned, I was amazed, and I'm sure a lot of people were, the percentage of people that own their own house in your community. And we would often say, that's a wealthy community.
Yeah.
There's that much wealth built. We have this tendency right now to talk about wealth building. And we talk about it when we talk about land reform and land access, because I think there's this apologetic feeling that we have to let people who haven't had access build wealth. But the ugly side of the coin from building wealth is profit maximizing. And it's a slippery slope between wealth building and profit maximizing.
Or exploitation.
Or exploitation.
Because that's what you have to do to become a billionaire. There's no organically grown billionaires. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to exploit other people in order to make that happen. But the access to wealth for people who've not had access to it isn't about money. It's about power. And they equate the accumulation of resources as a way to insulate themselves from negative impacts of power.
Well said.
And so this idea of wealth, of generating wealth, is about protecting the future. That's how I see it. That's how I understand it. Is that when people are talking about building wealth and generational wealth, it's about insulating their family from devastation. And it's not money for money's sake, but money as a form of protection.
Which makes a lot of sense, because the Native Americans who are here and a lot of people who were living subsistently off the land didn't need a bunch of money until clever people came and taxed them. Right. Suddenly now they had to have cash to pay their taxes. Before, they could produce what they needed, but the system was designed to push them towards making money. And so this wealth building to build this insulation from power, that's very I think, an important statement that you're making. And I guess my question is, where do we go, you know, when we are really looking at the meaning of wealth, and we're really looking at how do you create wealth in a society and how you build wealth in a healthy society, in an integrated society? What are the steps?
Well, I think, you know, we have to reckon with what wealth means to us. And wealth is about what's important and what you value. You know, I often talk about my grandfather not having much education, was functionally illiterate. He died owning his home and his old beat-up truck, left a little bit of life insurance to his wife. My mother, his eldest daughter, that was the first to go to college, first to get a master's degree, you know, spent 40 years teaching, did all the things she was supposed to do, and will die in debt. Not because she did these crazy financial risks and, you know, was backing this, and, you know, she just lived the life that she was taught, that education was going to get you out of poverty, that if you did these things, that they would, you know, ensure that you'd have this type of outcome. And each generation is further in debt. You know, these college educations are in debt. I'm still paying student loans from 1992 for a degree I didn't even get, right? It's insane. I paid for that loan 4 times over. But the cycle of us we have to break the cycle of letting other people determine for us what wealth means. And when we begin to take back the definition of wealth and begin to re-identify with the things that we value the most as being how we establish our own wealth, then we won't be as tied to other folks defining what wealth means for us.
We also talked a little bit about the difference between the individualistic approach, which many of us talk about these days, and how we are driven towards individualistic approach as opposed to a communal or collective cultural approach. And when I saw the cultural center sign, and it meant a lot to me. I mean, and you showed it in the photos. The center of culture meant a lot. It wasn't just a place to play music. It wasn't just a place for the kids to feel safe to come and hang out after school. It was a place also where food could be at the center of that culture. And I'm very interested in that, and how you reignite those cultures that are fully functional, and how you're seeing that going so far. How long has it been open so far?
We opened in May 3rd of 2025. It's been going well. We just did a community dinner on Monday to celebrate Martin Luther King's holiday. We probably had about 250 people that we fed that day. You know, every Friday night we do fish fry. We have, you know, all types of events. The farmers market is there on Saturdays. You know, the Girl Scouts meet there. The dance troupe meets there. It's a place, you know, the other part of this is that the building itself for 20 years was just dead. It was just a vacant building that sits at the main intersection of our community. So anybody that's coming in and out of Utica, you have to stop there and you have to bear witness to this barren space. Psychologically, what that does to a community, to now have that space transformed into a living entity that even when no one's there, the lights are on. It changes the psychological profile of what the community thinks is possible. When we started working on that building in June of 2024, within 3 months of us starting the construction renovation, 3 other buildings on Main Street replaced their roof. Right? they didn't ask us about it. It wasn't like coordinated, but it was like when people see that there's an investment happening, then other people want to make an investment too, because they don't want to be the last thing looking bad on the street. They want to, they want their building to look good. They want to also say that we're doing our part to contribute to the redevelopment of this community. And I think what's important for us is that we're not just about sharing stories. We are about building the infrastructure for that redesigning of our community. And when you can invite people into a process that is about changing the material conditions, then it's more than just a philosophical conversation. And people get involved and say, well, I don't want to sit around and talk about it. I don't want to talk about my feelings, but here's $50 on that building. You know what I'm saying? Here's some potatoes that I grew. Can you give them out to the elders? Yes, we can do all that. So it's people begin pitching in, and that fabric begins to restitch itself little by little. And we look at this as a generational project. I hate to use the word project because it's not a project. It's a 20-year love letter to the community, and we want to see at the end of that 20 years. What has changed? What is different? Because it's going to take that long to begin to reverse some of the trends, some of the negative trends that our community has been experiencing.
Thank you. Rural California is not that different than rural Mississippi, I think, in some ways. I grew up in Yolo County. Yeah. So there's more people from Yolo County than four here. Yeah, okay. But I'm always shocked when I go home. And even though I haven't lived there in a long time, I still think of it as going home. But I'm surprised when you look around a county. The seat of the county, Woodland, was always a thriving community for years. Not so much right now. When I drive through, things look a little tattered on the edge. I would have thought that over 30 years that some of the smaller towns, Madison, would have thrived, and yet they're still faltering. When I was a kid, the cannery was in Woodland. My grandma worked there at the same time that my aunts worked there, at the same time my mom worked there. There was a whole group of people that were working, like those 100.
Same story.
The 100 women that you said left that shirt factory. 150?
100. Yeah.
100. How do you reinvigorate a community with new jobs that might bring some of those people back? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about how do you weave that back in?
Yeah, I think job creation is really an interesting topic because we don't lack employment in our community. Unemployment is not the big issue. Housing is the big issue for us. Even though the factory closed and the high school closed and the other high school closed, people still work because we're close enough to the metropolitan area of Jackson, Vicksburg, Crystal Springs. We're close enough to where people are finding gainful and meaningful employment. So I don't know that we need to be thinking about bringing a bunch of jobs in order to maintain our community, but we do need to think about how do we provide quality housing and an infrastructure that can be outfitted for the needs of our young people that want to stay, are seeing an investment in the community, but don't have houses because people own their homes. We're not, people aren't moving out of their places. Folks are multi-generational. So when someone leaves a house, a family member gets into that, but there's not a lot of new housing stock. So we employ 19 people in our small community. And we provide a living wage. We provide 100% health coverage for our workers. We treat everybody like they deserve to be treated. But we can't do that for the entire community. And I don't know that that's necessarily our position. But housing is the big issue that we feel like we need to start tackling.
Okay. It's everywhere the same.
I appreciate y'all sticking with us. It's late. It's getting late in the night. I don't know how much longer we got here, how much time we got left. 10 minutes?
We got about 10 minutes,
Really?
yeah. Yeah, I
Wow.
know. We're doing good. We could take a few questions, too. But
All right.
before I let that happen, there's so many things. You talked about the washcloth that was on the flour bag. And, I mean, I grew up in a household where there was always a washcloth. But as things changed, cloths became sponges. You know, you'd see a lot of sponges in households.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many years back I started saying, oh, what is this? This is a mess, you know? Why are we using these things? Well, my wife is a great knitter, and we were talking about it, and she started knitting these washcloths. And I swear they remind me of exactly the kind of washcloths I grew up with, because they're that multicolored, kind of thin material. But what she won't do, and this is not casting any shade on her, she won't give up her liquid dish soap. Now, I grew up with powdered washing powder.
Yeah.
And we didn't have liquid washing powder, and I think that's an abomination still. Sorry for those of you who use it. But if you think about it, if you think about the concentration of powder and not using water, if you think about the water that we use for dish soap, the water that we use in our shampoos, you know, I mean, so now I'm back to bar soap. Bar soap for my hands, bar soap for my hair. I'd use bar soap for the dishes, but my wife doesn't like the way it splashes around.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, no, I gotta have that liquid dish soap. And I only bring this up because we've evolved in a world where all those things, as young people say, oh, that's old-fashioned. That's old-fashioned. Well, as you get older, you know what old-fashioned means. You know, you know that
Things you grew up with.
it was a fashion of the times. It made sense for the times. Native American people had fashions that were appropriate for the times too. We called them rituals as we got older. They weren't rituals. They were a fashion that made sense. You did things that fit. There was no waste.
Yeah.
There was reason behind it. But it's hard to move away from the trends and ask people to embrace some of the old fashioned and the old possibilities. And so we do need to bring children into this and have them experience those old fashions a bit more if this is going to be successful. How are you doing that in your community? What are the young people doing?
Well, first I'll say you have to pick your battles. You know, when you're talking about changing, you're not just talking about changing a dishwasher or, you know, whatever the soap and detergent. You're talking about cultural transformation. And when you understand it as cultural transformation, then you understand that it didn't go from dish soap powder to detergent overnight. It was a carefully orchestrated plan that happened to move people from one to the other. That took a generation or more. What people don't like to hear is how long change takes. Transformation is a long game. It's not short term. It means you have to be in it for the long haul. It means you have to be thinking about tomorrow, 20 years down the line, 40 years down the line. That's the way you have to be working towards. So you have to pick your battles, and you have to have patience. There's a quote, I can't remember exactly who said it, but the quote goes, "Give them what they want until they learn to want what you have to give." And I have a lot I can give, but, you know, I could have jumped out the gate the moment that we had a group together and said, forget a grocery store, we need to be opening a co-op. Nobody would have heard it. I'd have just been flapping my gums. But 3 years later, when the community advisory group members said it, everybody thought it was the best idea since sliced bread because it came from them and not from me. And so when they said it, immediately the energy wrapped around it and they began to carry it because it was theirs. They made it, it's their idea. They're gonna see it to the next phase. So I think part of it is about allowing people to be exposed to and come to a realization for themselves about what's best for them. Sometimes those things are gonna be the same thing that you think is best for you. But we can't pretend to think that we understand what's best for other people. Part of the challenge of having a multicultural community is that different people want and need different things, and our job is to figure out and negotiate the space in which we can all have what we need without suffering, without others suffering. And that's the challenge. And I think for us, it's about being in it for the long haul. We're said that we're going to dedicate 20 years to this work. We'll be at year 9 in 2 weeks. February 2nd will be the beginning of our the completion of our 9th year. And so we've got 11 more years to see what comes of this. And a lot of the work is being in response to both what's happening in the community, but what's happening outside of the community as well. And so we're watching and understanding the implications of things that are taking place outside and factoring that into what we need to adjust for in our own community. So that's all I got to say about that.
Good. Question. We got time for a question or two. There's one. Go for it.
You mentioned people need housing, and I agree people need housing, and also people need farms and taking care of the land, and not filling the land full of housing. Is there a plan in your community, and I say this to everybody, what's the plan to keep developing our prime farmland into housing starts, shopping malls, factories, IT centers? I just wonder what the plan is.
Yeah, thank you. So in Utica, so much of what was housing in our community is no longer viable housing. So it wouldn't be appropriating any farmland, it would just be redeveloping places that had already been developed for homes, but haven't been redeveloped or haven't been really taken care of. So you have a lot of dilapidated homes and houses that were probably built in the 50s and 60s that need either to be renovated or torn down. So a lot of the designs that we have been working with have been infill housing and not necessarily creating any new housing developments. We are also a very small community. Our community, there's 700 people in the town center and 4,500 people in our zip code. So we have a lot of space and a small number of people, and we're not really looking to attract a whole lot of new people to our community. We just want the people that want to stay and be in the community to have places to live.
One more, and then we can all go home.
Well, we've answered all the questions.
We did. We sucked all the air out of the room.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Hey, Carlton, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Really enjoyed being here. Thank you.